Still, but some of the restaurants are shut down now.
No, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
So
when we're
not
there,
as many eating
yeah,
options.
when
but-
we're there, we eat in, not out,
Mhm.
you know, just because it's, you know, expensive
Yeah.
when, you know, all your children
Yeah,
want to eat
yeah.
out with you.
Probably get a nice steak, yeah.
Yeah. They don't understand that.
Right.
They're always like, can't we go to the Boji store? I'm like, you know, vote, eat out.
Yeah.
You know, you make your choice.
Yeah. Mitch?
How are you?
Good. Hey.
A couple minutes, I suppose.
Your call. I'll let you hold on.
Yeah. Especially heard from Lauren's gonna be a couple minutes, but,
I haven't heard from anybody else.
yeah. There's a lot of other confirmed people that,
Yeah, like, this is what my calendar looks like on there. For a second, I don't know what anything is.
that's a lot of tea times.
Yeah, we're golfing at least a week.
Yeah. And fishing.
Fishing.
One more minute here.
So you could golf up there.
Depends on what this road is, and the time it goes. All that I would have to do,
Just
I
show
would have
up,
to be there. I think
stand in a certain place, walk at a certain pace.
I think they can walk in, I'm just not sure.
Oh. You could be.
I just have to show up and sit down.
Unless something has changed.
I'll keep you up there.
It's a great opportunity to play some.
Get Jules out there.
Right.
All right, I think we'll get going, so we'll call this meeting to order. This is the Joint DLC Funds Economic Development Committee. We have people representing from city council, school, community, city, and other representatives here too. So, we'll go ahead and start. Any additions to the agenda this evening or changes?
Mayor, no additions, but I did hand out an updated copy of the A1 analysis. So that was updated late this afternoon, so that is on everybody's desks and on the back table as well.
Okay. I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. Any visitors to be heard this evening? I don't.
Yeah.
I'll call you up here in a second, Drew, so, okay. There's no old business, so we're on new business here. We have a presentation of A1 market analysis. So Drew, that's you. Nate, anything to kick this off with that? or
Nope,
just
we'll
have Drew
hand
come
it
up?
over to Drew.
Okay.
My comments are in the memo, but nothing real substantial there, so.
We're streaming this tonight too, so that way if there are people watching online, I think all of us know who you are, but just introduce yourself and.
You bet. So I'm Drew O'Brien with A1 Development Solutions. I am a development consultant, and we are working with the city and the development team on the development opportunities on the south side of town and the expansion of the industrial park down there. I just have been working on putting together a comparison analysis reports for like properties to that ground on the south side of town, just to help us as we're navigating through understanding the value of that ground as we kind of get into possibly negotiating any opportunities to acquire that. So just kind of walking through this report here. I'll just kind of go step by step. If you guys have any questions, great. Otherwise, hopefully I kind of cover all those questions. It's kind of hard to find. We were trying to find, it's easy to find a bunch of pieces of ground within a county, within a region, but I was trying to really narrow this down to pieces of ground that fit that larger piece of ground, 100+ acres. They needed to be close enough to an existing city or municipality that they had the opportunity for short-term development opportunity. I wanted them to be currently ag and row crop farmed, but I wanted them to not yet have the expansion of utility to that land, but obviously be close enough that it was a real possibility for that to happen. So I was trying to find the truest form of apples to apples that I could when kind of going through this report. So looking at that kind of second page there, it kind of lists the properties that we found. We kind of had to go everywhere from Humboldt all the way down to Vermilion to find enough opportunities that kind of fit that same mold. So we've got one in Lincoln County, Minnehaha, Clay, Union, another one in Union, another in Clay, and then Minnehaha is the last one. So I'll buzz through these kind of quick. The first one in Lincoln County, you can kind of see the lot. Obviously, one thing that I thought was kind of interesting too is because a lot of people will say, well, if we're going to go and look at this as ag land, if we're going to go apples to apples, we need to understand, well, what are they cropping? Is the ground actually good row crop ground, or is it just kind of, ground that no one can use, because obviously that impacts value. So I even included kind of CPI scores and some other items so we can see that we're dealing with even good quality farm ground, whether it's going to be used for that or not. So again, we're getting that true kind of one-to-one analysis. So looking at this one, it's just outside of T. So you can kind of see, anyone who's been to T recently knows that expansion is kind of going in all directions. So this one's a little bit on just that outer edge. So obviously on the south side of town, adjacent straight south, there's that low density neighborhood that is going on. So that's kind of that same distance from town to show that expansion and development is happening at kind of in that vicinity. And obviously a lot of you guys have probably heard about the expansion of the golf course on the south side of town. So again, that fits within that kind of proximity bubble to be similar. That ground was sold at about a little over 10,000 an acre. Moving on to B, this one is in Minnehaha. This one is going to be up by, let's see, who is this one?
Humboldt.
Yeah, this is one up by Humboldt. So this one is a little bit further outside of town, but again, with how they've been doing some of their pocket developments a little farther outside of town, again, I felt that it fit. We're at 160 acres on this one. This one coming in at that little over 13,000 an acre. Option C in Clay County. This one is going to be just outside of Vermilion. Again, this one fits very much within that tract of being right outside. Again, it's a little bit bigger city as well, being Vermilion. So we expect that comp to even be a little bit higher. A little surprised to see kind of fall within that same range, being at that 12,300 range with 126 acres. But within that next phase of development, kind of area right on the edge of town. Going down to Union, we have those options just outside of Beersford. One of them right on city limits, the second one just a quarter section away with E&D. These ones again kind of fitting the right size of community, comparable as well as the same vicinity of town. This one coming in at that 13,500 range. And then getting down here we have Clay County again, which would be down by Vermilion. This one's a little bit farther away, but the price is a little bit higher. But again, within that vicinity of development down by Vermilion. And then this is the one that there were one or two of those that were just a little bit farther away from town. And so maybe those prices were a little bit lower. So I wanted to make sure that I had one that kind of accounted for the opposite side of that. And I think this one is kind of the true teller of where we should see for value, maybe a max value for a most like opportunity in an optimum position. So this one's in Minnehaha. If you kind of look down at that regional and local proximity map, this is adjacent to Foundation Park. So this is ground that will be future addition to that Foundation Park. It is currently crop ground, row crop ground. It is over 100 acres. It is an obvious expansion of that industrial development in the future. and then that one coming in at about that 26,500 an acre.
And that sold in December,
Yes, I think they were.
12/19/25?
Yes, yep, so that one would have been the most recent sale as well. So I have all those kind of put together, so, and again, this analysis isn't to say this ground that we're looking at on the south side of town, this isn't to say this is what that ground is worth, this isn't to say I'm putting a price tag on that ground, this is just to say if we're taking like comparable properties within our region of South Dakota that have sold within the last couple of years in as close of a model of being the same as we can possibly get. This is kind of what it said that expected market value for that type of land is. And so obviously that one is showing us an average of about 15,000. But again, that's just what those like properties are selling for or have sold for. Give us an idea of what we'd be looking at for those. And one thing I think it's really important to point out is that ground. You kind of have those three tiers of ground, right? You have that farm ground that's outside of town, that's what it's going to be for probably the foreseeable future. It's farm ground that has a price tag. You have that ground that's on the edge of town, that's development ready, it already has utility infrastructure in place, perhaps it's already zoned, it's already, has everything ready to go for somebody to come in, buy it, and start building. That's one piece. We're right in the middle, where obviously there is a benefit to being on the edge of town, there is a benefit to being annexed into the city. Obviously there's a benefit of understanding what the future development plan is of a property like that. But at the same time, the capital investment of the utility infrastructure and a lot of the moving pieces that have to happen for that to be build ready for an actual end user opportunity, that puts it in its own category. And I think that's where you kind of fit right here with this market analysis, that's kind of putting it into that category. Are there any questions on the report at all? I can clarify or answer.
Why do you feel that sale G is closer to market value than, say, D and E, which essentially is Beersford versus the land in Sioux Falls west of the Amazon? I feel
Sure.
like that is very industrial booming right now over
Yep.
there.
And I'm-
However, though, we're not Sioux Falls.
Yeah, and I might have, the way I worded that might have been a little different. I guess what I was trying to say is this would be the absolute top range of what ground that is adjacent to an expanding industrial. I mean, you're to your point, you're outside of Sioux Falls, the biggest city in South Dakota. You're right outside of probably the largest industrial park expansion in the state of South Dakota in probably decades. And we're bringing in, we have Amazon, we have so I'm saying of all of those things, it should be the most expensive ground to fit into this category that we're saying is future development ground without utility infrastructure currently in place, and that's the price that it's at. So that's why I included there, because that should be the absolute top market value. But I agree with you, we're talking ground on the south side of Lennox, that should not be the exact same, they aren't the same. But they fit within that same category, so I'm sure the top range, and then by having ones that are like outside of Humboldt by a mile or so, ground, that's kind of like that exact opposite. That's still in that range, but it's kind of the bottom range, so we kind of even out.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with you, that's a little bit different, but again, it fits within that kind of category as the top.
Questions and discussion? Questions, any requests for additional information?
Perfect, well, as always, if you do have any questions, call me back up, otherwise, most of you have my information. If not, happy to do it again, and reach out with any questions, and happy to answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir.
You bet.
So, on this memo here, there's no action requested, so Drew's able to present, let's see here. You did talk about the $1,000 appraisal. The committee
In the
agrees
memo,
to
yes.
do so.
I talked to many of you individually and sent messages out, to several of you, one-on-one, about whether there's a willingness to help cover an appraisal cost for the landowner. That was $1,000. My impression was that there was not enough interest in doing so, but if that's not the case, now is the time to make that.
And Gene's requested that we pay that.
Correct.
Too, so the landowner.
The only way I could see that we would move forward with that is if it's tied to an agreement.
Like at an eventual closing or something along
Yes.
those lines, like a credit at closing if it were repurchased or.
Yeah.
Credit at closing.
Yeah.
I personally was fine with paying that cost of that appraisal, but that was.
I am too, but I don't know who else you spoke to on council and the committee, so.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. I know a couple that were not, well, they're not here tonight, but
I don't want $1,000 to hold us up from this process being seen through, so, I mean, if it's $1,000, then like Danny said, I have no issue with us paying that to keep this moving forward.
you see them pay it up front or as a credit at closing that we're.
So my concern about paying it up front is that if Gene doesn't move forward, we're stuck with that $1,000 that goes essentially possibly nowhere because we don't have any developers on the front end of that unless we find other land.
But we have that data and we have the appraisal that will be ours then too, so, but yeah, he's not wanting to agree that it's just information, so.
Right, it's just information at
Yeah.
that point. I know there's possible other properties, but in what time frame?
So,
And then the next buyer is gonna say, well, that's your business, I'm not paying for that. I mean, essentially, we could, like I said, build it in as a credit, so we're still paying for it, it's just making sure that we're negotiating. I feel like it doesn't give us any grounds otherwise to move this along.
I don't,
Drew's got some thoughts on this?
Just a note, if, I might, just a thought on that, if you are looking at, possibly looking at other ground that would most likely be very comparable to the ground that we're looking at, it might be worth, like I say, I completely understand and I would agree that no matter what, I would want it as a credit at closing, but if that weren't to go through, at least it would give you a real good base for what to expect if we were to negotiate on other ground. That would be similar, same region, most likely same land type, just something to at least have some use out of that report.
if we don't help pay for this, are they obligated to help to give us the information?
No,
I want to point out, it's not an appraisal that's being done, it's another market analysis, which is the same thing that Drew's just done, because, and the same thing that Greg Brown did for the LADC 3 years ago. So it's not an actual appraisal. It's a
initially he
market
had requested
analysis.
appraisal, but I think, my guess is that it's more market analysis, but I don't.
He's using vendor rate, so,
We
yeah, okay.
So if it were an appraisal, that means like Lincoln County would come out and appraise it, or who?
No, you get a certified appraiser, just like you would on any mortgage or, a house sale.
Which guarantees you the value for a loan that you're taking out, essentially, if that's the process. So market analysis is giving a market price to property that would be reasonable to maybe sell it at. It doesn't guarantee that that's what the value is, it's the market value for putting it out there. So Does that make sense? Is that the same then if they don't have a loan? No, you don't need to, if you don't borrow money to buy property, you don't need an appraisal. But if you do borrow money to buy a property, you're required to have an appraisal.
And maybe it's worth pointing out that if the city or LADC were to buy this, it's most likely that we'd be talking to a bank, we may need an appraisal.
And a bank will only loan you what the appraised value is, so,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that's what the sale price would have to be. So, if you made an offer for $100,000 on a property and it only appraised for $50,000, that difference has to be made up by somebody or it doesn't.
By the buyer typically.
Or the seller either sells it for cheap
Not
or
the
the
bank.
buyer has
What's
to
that?
bring.
Not the bank. That's the-
Yeah.
All the
That's the
appraisal is
bottom
saying is, the bank will only give you the amount of money that it is appraises for.
Correct.
So that being said, I feel like, I don't know, I think it benefits us to just pay it.
And Drew, you said the average for this analysis was about $15,000?
Yep, that's about what I came to for.
Yeah.
For
With
like
all of
property
these,
value.
yeah. I wonder what it would be without the Sioux Falls, without the Minnehaha County.
I just did quick math, but if you do A, B, and G, the average is 16.6.
A, B, and G.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really not that much different.
And I can narrow that down if there's something you want removed or others that you know if you like added, I can do that pretty quickly too.
Sure.
Does that expenditure have to go to the full council for
That's what we were
approval?
just talking about. It does certainly through claims, but I think it would make sense to make sure the whole council is aware of it. So I'd probably at least have it on consent agenda on Monday, if that's the direction that this committee wants to move.
I would like to say that we pay that $1,000 for an appraisal.
A market analysis, it's not an appraisal. So that should be, my opinion is that needs to be clarified what you're paying
Yeah.
for. An appraisal is completely different than a market analysis.
And I guess just for my clarification, which one is this? Is this for an appraisal or is it
Well,
for? So I believe these are.
The request was for,
Yeah,
to
you did a
help
market
cover-
analysis.
I think he had one done as well.
He has already had one
his
done.
request to me was to help pay for an appraisal. Those were his words.
So if I could clarify what I'm agreeing to, I would agree to pay for an appraisal, but not a market analysis since we've already done that with A1.
In my opinion, the appraisal would carry more value because it helps you understand, again, what the
Right.
bank is going to loan on,
Yes.
which is important when making that decision. And then the appraisal is it's a nonpartisan decision, you know, that everyone can use to make decisions on versus. a
So if we
market
move forward with the appraisal, then it's not with A1, correct?
Correct, that would be.
Yeah,
an
I would just do
official
more, an appraisal would need to be done through a
Third
licensed
party,
appraiser.
yeah.
I'm in agreement with that.
And it's not my place to interject yet, but I just recently paid for appraisal, double the price at least. It's gonna be $2,500 at least. I just paid for one.
You want to cap it amount?
Is he paying that for?
He asked
Or
for,
should we
he asked for us to
Pay it all, right?
consider covering some of it.
Well, he needs
Some
a
of
little
it.
skin in the game.
Is that was his words, some of it, or?
So pulling up here.
I would say if it's willing to pay up to $1,000, if it's more than that, split it 50-50.
Got an appraiser, $1,000. City will pay, question mark, 2 to 3 weeks.
Since he says $1,000, I say we offer to pay it up to $1,000 for the completion of an appraisal.
A certified, an
Yes.
appraisal by a certified appraiser.
I'd request to know who the appraiser's going through to make sure. There's agreement there.
Yep. Should be agreed upon.
Might want to agree on what you're doing here.
So council members, expect that on your agenda on Monday,
It's been a little while out there.
with whatever I can provide by then.
Thank you.
Okay. More discussion items or anything else? Anything else come up back up to mind with Drew being up here again?
You know, and I could just point out on all these, I don't think I have specific recommendations or action items, but if you have further work that you think needs to be done, between, you know, tonight's the time to talk through that stuff so that we can task the appropriate folks with getting those tasks completed.
Trying to get Larry, I don't know if it's just for this or later, so, but, just clarity on that. Is there an agreement that will be made that, the acreage must be purchased after 5 years?
Hey, you on the option agreement?
Yes.
Yeah, we can move on to that, if you want.
Option to purchase.
We have the wrong memo here. Market analysis. Yeah.
And this is just a first draft of an idea of how we could do this. This obviously wouldn't be vetted, negotiated, and discussed, make sure you guys are all comfortable with it, and then obviously a conversation with the seller as well.
So the letter of interest option is something that Drew prepared. The option agreement sample that's in there is a redacted version that's been used by other local community somewhat recently. And I think overall, the language is very applicable to what we're looking at here. You know, before I hand it off to Drew to explain sort of his perspective and take on this, you know, when somebody comes knocking on our door and says, we need X many acres of industrial land with this much water and sewer capacity and this much electrical capacity, and we say, you know, we have an option on land. You know, the way that would typically happen is that, you know, the option would be exercised, in this case, most likely by the development corporation, because they don't have the same restrictions that we do in buying and purchasing property. And we would find a way to transfer it to that industrial partner through the development corporation, with the city essentially helping cover the cost until, the city or the development corporation covering that cost until such time that it closes again. A great example is what happened on the IE land on the southeast end of town 4 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. The city ended up purchasing the land within, quite frankly, a day of closing. I had 3 industrial folks that were interested in the land, and we ended up getting it to LADC, who then sold it to the industrial partners. Works very smoothly, make sure everybody is made whole, and still gets the land in the hands of the person that needs to develop it, so. Drew?
Just kind of give an overview of that option that I put together. So yeah, so I was just trying to think of a creative way to kind of avoid that scenario where it might need to be, again, it's under option, you have someone approaches you, then you have to exercise your option, then you have to turn around and go through that whole process again. And then in that same way, making sure that, you know, in a situation like this, we're wanting to make sure that everyone feels like they are being made or made whole, and they feel like that everyone is being kind of given the best opportunity to receive the advantage of that land sale. I took kind of a unique approach, not gonna lie, this exact approach, I've never actually done it, but kind of talking through it and the concept of it, I feel like it might be a unique opportunity where this could potentially be a good option. Kind of first on your note of it being 5 years, you know, the length of that term, we can figure out what makes the most sense, you know, how long we can think through how long do we think it's gonna take to actually acquire all of that land or get all of that land sold to an end user. But just for the lack of an example, I threw in 5 years. And basically how I propose putting this together is, say for this sake, it's a 5-year option. We commence that on a date. There'd be an option fee that, you know, we would negotiate. There'd be that initial option fee, and then each year you'd renew that with an additional option fee. I would propose that if at the end of whatever that term is, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, we have kind of, for lack of a better term, a sunset clause, which says, okay, we understand you're not gonna sit on this forever and let us just take little pieces of it. So if it's after 5 years, if it's after 10 years, whatever we decide is fair, whatever remaining land is left over, then the city or the development corp will purchase that ground at this agreed upon price. So let's say $25,000 or whatever it is. Whatever that number is, we agree upon this price, we will take any remaining ground. But in the meantime, while we're developing that, we're taking on the risk of expanding utility infrastructure to get to the area so that we can get end users in place. So we will continue to market this ground to those end users, and then we will try to sell that. And then I have tiered kind of sales bracket. So again, these are all just kind of numbers to fit in here that can obviously be minutiae based on negotiations, but say if someone purchases 10 acres or less, then that sells for a minimum of $40,000 an acre. Somebody purchases 10 to 20 acres, then that's $35,000. If they purchase 20 to 50 acres, it's $30,000. If they purchase more than 50 acres, it's at that $25,000. But then we would also put, and again, this would be negotiated with the seller, if they wanted well, I think we can get more out of it, well then give us the opportunity to negotiate above those prices. We're saying that's a minimum threshold. Anything that's above that minimum price and that threshold that we're able to sell that for, we split that cost 80-20. So you get 80% of that net increase in cost. So if we're able to sell 10 acres or less for $50,000 an acre, then you get an extra $8,000 an acre. The city gets $2,000 an acre. That additional benefit of that 20% is just to show that we're motivated to get as much money out of that deal as we can to make sure that we're doing the best by both the seller as well as motivating ourselves to do that to recoup some of those costs. At the end of that sunsetted clause, best case scenario, at the end, all that land sold, any money that has gone into that option agreement that we paid annually up to that point would be non-refundable. That's just his money in the green, because hopefully we've done so well, that money doesn't matter anymore. On the off chance that there is land remaining at the end of that sunset period and we purchase it, then we would have whatever that option money that had been paid during that term would then be credited back and go towards that ground being purchased at that time. Again, kind of unique situation in which we are almost serving as a middleman in that process, where we only become the actual buyer of that property in the instance of that sunset clause where we buy the remaining ground, but instead we're acting as that middleman agent to bring in market, have the control over that ground, and so we would negotiate those deals with end users, but then the actual transaction would take place between that end user and the seller of the ground. So that way we're not doubling up on any kind of extra fees that would need to be unnecessarily recouped by anybody, but it's just an agreement that we are serving as that seller's agent, creating those deals that he would obviously have to agree upon, but as long as they meet these threshold numbers that we've agreed upon in the agreement, then they move forward. So again, kind of unique, but just kind of a take on how something like this could possibly go to help the seller feel more motivated, more feel like they're definitely not, we're not here to try to get bottom dollar on that ground so we can turn around and make as much money as we can reselling it. Because as far as what I've understood, that's never been the intention of this project. It has always been to just help development move forward. We're not here to make a bunch of money. We're here to help development happen. And hopefully this helps kind of close that gap between, well, we understand that you're not selling development build-ready ground right now, so give us the option so that we can close that gap and you can get closer to that number that you want and everybody wants. Not to say that that'll work, but it's an idea that I think could possibly at least be worth getting in a room and having a conversation about. Maybe be a pathway to other ideas.
If this agreement was in place 2 years ago, do you think we'd have any land to sell anymore?
It's that's a loaded question. I feel like just based on, like for instance, we're only at the point that we are right now in the conversation, and I know personally I have at least 2, if not more, interested end users, in that ground, and we don't even have option on the ground yet.
Yeah.
So I definitely think there's interest. There's, to your kind of point, the last time we went through this process, as soon as you acquired the ground, like the folks were there. If you have the ground, if you have the utility infrastructure, and it's at a price that's affordable for them to move forward, which I think this puts it into that tier that it's affordable for people to come in and have a build-ready site to move forward. Like you guys are in that kind of Goldilocks range of Sioux Falls that you kind of hit that sweet spot for a lot of people that if you build it, they will come kind of vibe. I'm not here to make promises, but I do feel like you're in a really good opportunity zone. But like I say, there's boxes that have to be checked. The utility infrastructure has to be there, and you have to have it at a price that still makes sense. Because that's why people are building here instead of in Foundation Park.
From a developer buyer perspective, is it enough for us to get utilities on the perimeter?
Yes.
And they can worry about the interior?
Especially for your bigger
or
users.
something else?
And it just depends on, when you get
Because
really.
every developer, every buyer is gonna need a different
Yep.
piece of land, different things built into it, different street access.
And I think a lot of that, it depends on your end user, kind of the size of what they need, the land use that they have, if they have access requirements, things like that, the size of the parcel. I mean, obviously bigger parcels, I'd say completely up to them. If you're looking at those bigger pieces. If you're on the outer edge, you know, obviously that's where they're gonna be able to get that access. I think the point where you'd start needing to consider, okay, do we need to put in a, you know, cul-de-sac here, you know, with extension up there, is when you get down to what's left, okay, we need to now find a way to do these smaller lots that can be a little more, you know, 1 acre lots, 2 acre lots for some of these smaller ones, if you get there.
Lighter industrial stuff.
Yep, and so I think that's, but then at that point, you're accounting for that infrastructure improvement beyond just being in the ditch, and you're adding that onto your land costs, you know, to recoup that. Because again, you're not looking to make a profit on that, you're looking to pay for that.
I mean, the only thing I'd suggest there, I guess, to me, you gotta have you'll have a layout, right, of what the subdivision's going to be. You have one already that we've done. I mean, you have to make sure you understand, because most people that buy these lots, they want the roads built, they want everything built, they don't wanna have to build that stuff, is probably most of the ones I've seen. So I think you should be ready to build the road where you need to build the road. Now granted, that layout can be a little fluid based off of who the tenant is. But I think you just gotta understand that there's still gonna be more cost beyond just the land that you'll have to, and the perimeter utilities. I think you better plan on some interior stuff too.
But we can tip that interior stuff
Yeah.
without too much difficulty, I think.
For sure, that's what I would look at doing.
But we'll still have to have a way to front the cash initially for at least a few years until those incentive payments start coming through. Some of them, sure. Comments, questions on the option agreement?
Drew, I think the only question I had looking at it was, I mean, I like where this is heading. I'm trying to understand when the purchase happens between the tenant and the landowner now, Cooper. They're writing the check for the buried ground essentially, but you were still selling a piece of ground, a lot, if you will, that has other improvements around it.
Yep.
How do you see that kind of happening?
And I think that's where it's, you know, those are the bare minimum costs that we would see going to the seller.
Yeah.
I think that when we look at what infrastructure improvement that we do to help that, you know, move that forward, obviously that would be where that additional negotiation goes in. So if they wanna buy it bare, they wanna do the infrastructure improvement, whatever it is themselves, go for it. If you want us to sell it to you, you know, build ready, pad ready, okay, then we figure out what those costs are, and then we build that into your purchase price. So you're still, those are just guidelines, you're still negotiating each deal that makes the most sense for all parties.
So you could potentially, if they want that infrastructure in on the interior, street, water, sewer,
Yep,
so on and so forth, we can build that into our sales price to help help
Exactly.
take care of the front cash.
yep. What it does is it gives you the control to negotiate in good faith with these end users to then at least be able to formulate what those end prices need.
Is this a typical negotiation? I guess I've never heard of number 5, the revenue sharing above minimum price.
So, I mean, I would say the whole thing is definitely outside of the box from kind of a traditional option, for sure. The revenue sharing, I know one of my partners said that he was privy to a contract that was that way, where a developer had sold, or the developer had purchased ground from a seller. That one, the deal actually went through, but then in the contract, it actually had a deal that, because they knew that they were gonna develop and sell that ground. So then it was any sale of that ground that was over X amount of dollars, because it was basically, okay, you need this to make your money, right? So then anything that was net over that sale price, then there was that revenue share of whatever that percentage was. It's, again, it's not very common, but it's one that I was just kind of really trying to find ideas to help this one, knowing that it's kind of a unique situation to make sure everybody kind of felt whole. Now, again, and that's not to say that this has to be the way that we go. We can go with a traditional option for sure. I just wanted to present an outside the box idea of how it could be done, and this was only one way.
can speak a little bit to the option that's redacted there, because that came from our Del Rapids organization, Messer Fund. And, you know, it worked really well for us. I would say the one thing that maybe we got pushed back from the landowner after, it was a 7-year option. We had the land prices established over that time frame, what we buy it for. Within that 7 years of that option, the land went up a little bit, and so that kind of put that landowner a little bit uneasy. Got us a little sideways with them. So I do like that you are trying to do this tiered thing, because I think that just helps that a little bit. From their perspective, that's what they'll worry about is, okay, I'm tied into this now, and say land goes up, you know, I want some flexibility there. And that was probably the one thing that I would have tried to work back into that past one that we had. But otherwise, the options are fabulous for us. It really just gets you to the point where you can stop focusing on the land purchase and start focusing on how to break tenants.
Recruitment.
Yeah.
What steps do we have to take place here for this option agreement, or?
If we were actually going to do something along these lines, I'd want to get Brett involved, to get a formal draft going, probably consult with Drew. Make sure that we're incorporating the more unique aspects of this option agreement into that. And we can certainly start that work, if that's what somebody would like to see.
Do we want to wait until there is an appraisal? Does it make sense to wait until an official appraisal's done before we spend the time for legal to look through this?
Done or at least agreed upon?
would
I don't
say
know
you
that I
should-
put a ton of legal work into this until we've
I
got
would
some
say
more.
you get the appraisal done
Yeah.
first, and then a determination if we can even come to
It's
terms
worth it.
after that, before you.
Yes.
In my opinion,
Because
just,
those two,
oh, sorry.
an appraisal and an agreed upon price also could be two totally different things.
My opinion is a great step between now and then would be getting in a room with the seller and just, again, make sure that everyone understands that this is a completely palms up conversation and no one's trying to hide anything from anybody. Let's just have a conversation, talk through, so we can completely take numbers out of it, but even just talk through, this is kind of a concept, you know, let's put some framework in place that we can all agree upon, that if the numbers were to work, does this make sense? So then that way, when those items do come together, then all we have left is to actually kind of agree upon these numbers. I think that would be a great step.
So far for takeaways, next steps, we've got, get this appraisal work done, one way or another. I'd like to recommend moving forward with Drew's suggestion to meet with the property owners, and for Drew to kind of take the lead on that. We're talking land values, okay. I can tell you what Iowa farmland is worth, that's about as far as my knowledge extends. Something, I think just see what we can do to keep that conversation moving in the right direction.
I think that makes sense. How long does it take for the appraisal?
Gosh, I mean, depends
2 to
on-
3 weeks is what Gene had sent me
Oh.
from whoever he had talked to.
Depends on the firm, how busy they are.
Yeah,
That would be,
Is that-
that would be reasonable.
pretty normal right now, I
Yeah.
suppose.
I'd like to, Bryce, you have anything that you're kind of holding back that you wish you could share, or?
Well, no, and what I'm gonna share really is, it's good that I've got a lot of information, because it's really the step after the next 3, 4 steps you're gonna take, that then can talk about some funding options, so.
Yeah.
And I think one thing about the option too, whatever you end up with, you know, if it's not Gene that you're approaching, or I don't know why you wouldn't present a similar option scheme to another landowner.
I would agree.
Sure.
I just think it's, the more you can, because you don't have cash to cash flow, so the more you can rely on that option and draw when you need it, I think you're better off doing
Drew, is there anything you can think of that we need to cross off our list before this group meets again?
No, like I
And there's
said,
things that we can meet next week too and figure out, okay, where's
Yeah.
some easy cross-offs we can tackle. I don't wanna bring this group together again until we've got something, for you to
Yeah.
consider, in some way, shape, or form.
In my opinion, we're at the point where we just need to take the information that we have, some concepts that we have, if we could get the appraisal, great, but then just really have a conversation with the seller and make sure that there is a path moving forward, just so that we don't end up in a spot where we waste a bunch of people's time. And if we come out of that and feel that there's just not a path forward that's gonna make sense for everybody to come out of it a winner, then I think, then you look at what is the next land option for us to go start looking at.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that conversation is probably the number one, and then that appraisal I think would be a great piece to have. But I'd make sure that whoever does the appraisal, make sure that you're okay with that.
Yep.
It needs to be a good option selected.
I mean, I don't think, do you need to wait till the next committee meeting to just talk about the appraiser?
No, what we'll do is I'll be in touch with Gene tomorrow, and we will talk through, make sure that's a certified appraiser that we can agree to. Have it on the agenda for council next week to approve formally.
Yep.
Then we can move forward.
Okay.
So we can move forward on this within the next week.
Yeah, as long as Drew and SMGA, Mitch, Sharice, whoever else wants to speak into that, I don't know anybody in the appraisal world, so I would have no value to give to that, but others probably would, so.
Yeah, we can find somebody that's mutually agreeable, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah.
Perfect. Well, anyone,
Okay.
whoever needs anything from me, I'm always just a phone call away.
Okay, thank you, Drew. So that was, we went through A, we got kind of some direction there, and the same as B. C, we have funding partners discussion, so I'll invite Bryce, that's your cue, I guess.
Bryce Seeley with Sioux Metro Growth Alliance. I'm sorry you're stuck with me. Obviously, I'm the only one that had no interest in an election that's going on today, or they needed my assistance for. I absentee voted about a month ago, so. I'm gonna pass around if you take those, pass around. And there's on this particular graph that's coming up, you will see a number of different funding sources. The best thing that I could have come up here today is that we'll just buy it and then we'll finance it. That would be probably the answer you're looking for your funding mechanism. That's not going to happen today. On the graph that's being handed out, there are a number of different things. This is just a whole litany of different things that are grants, and not all just grants, low interest loans that are available for a number of different projects, different size, different variation in economic development. Some wouldn't relate to this at all. Some would. Some, it's what we would call need to have a bird in hand. You're not going to get XYZ grant or loan unless you've got something for sure available. I know that it was in the memo that Nate put together earlier, just for some examples, the historical, I'm sure you all know this, but Foundation Park, for example, the money that put that all together, other than the state having a huge investment in it, was about 8 or 9 local banks that each agreed to about a $2 million upfront apiece to kind of make that happen. Likewise, 20 plus years ago, over in Brandon, the Colton Park was put together more by utilities and the city coming together to pull that funding together. Those are much more difficult to come by than they used to. And frankly, nothing against Foundation Park. That came together because they had a bird in hand that then backed out. There was an option on the ground and it had to be purchased. And so the state came in with significant resources to make that park happen. That won't happen again. Now, there are ready funds, there are futures funds, if you're really tied to the next governor of South Dakota, they have a slush fund. I mean, there are ways to get different, that was I probably shouldn't have said the term, but there are ways, if you've seen during the campaign season, money has gone out the door for industrial parks. Usually it's for the improvements, but that's just who's paying for what. You can get there in a different variation. But like I said, this graph, this list has all kinds of different funding mechanisms. Probably half of them wouldn't fit what we're talking about here, but it's a good time to have this resource in front of you for when we get to however many steps we are down the road. I would just I think Sharice mentioned this too, you can have a certified appraiser, that's great, but if your seller's not, it means nothing. So, but I do encourage you to, because I'm an old assessor too, so there's assessed value. Somebody mentioned assessed values early. There's what a broker is going to tell you it's worth, and then there's an actual appraised value. Make sure that the seller's talking about an appraisal, not vendor coming out, because I can do that, Sharice could do that for you. And It'd be a lot less than $1,000.
Yeah, Drew did it.
Yeah, but I mean, on what this seller is looking for, a per acre, based on a specific tract. But in the world you all work in, it needs to be a certified appraisal. It really does. Because otherwise, you all, quasi-government and government, end up in the line of fire for you did what and how. So, I'd stand by for questions. Obviously, I would mainly divert all of those to Josh, because he's a lot smarter than me anyway, so.
I think that's a great point they bring up about the appraisal and the purpose of it, especially since we're representing municipalities and the public.
It really needs to, whether it's you're working with family members you don't agree with, or you're working with public funds or quasi-public funds, it needs to be as nailed down as you can.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, Bryce.
Bryce. Any other discussion in regards to funding partners? Or questions for Bryce? Okay. Next on the agenda is the adjournment. Right?
Yes, I just want to make sure if there's any other tasks of this group or anything that you're interested in hearing or learning more about, that we can gather before our next meeting. We won't set the next meeting tonight because I think we need to make some substantial progress on these other items first, but I would expect something in
Are we
July,
gonna attempt a meeting with the landowners sometime soon, or we're gonna meet before that?
sometime soon.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got these two takeaways for sure, and then I've got a list of a couple things that I want to make sure to follow up on. The first is the appraisal by a certified appraiser. The second one is for A1 to begin meeting with the seller and figure out, is there a path forward there that we can all agree on.
I also like Mitch's suggestion of offering this to the other landowners that we know are interested in selling. It might just be worth the conversation to see if they're open to some type of agreement like what we just reviewed.
I know we're just in the beginning of this, but do we have a projection as I'm looking at the deadline column for the funding?
Some of these, they're open each year, some of them don't really close. The challenge with most of the federal ones, and Bryce, if I'm out of line here, let me know. The federal ones, you don't know for sure when they're going to open up,
They don't.
because you don't know when the federal appropriation is going to happen. So the federal fiscal year starts October 1st. They may not pass their budget until April. And so they'll wait 2 months, 3 months, get their ducks in a row, and then they'll open it up. So every year, it used to be fairly predictable, quarterly, it's gonna be done quarterly. It's not that way anymore. On the state level, that's fairly predictable every year.
That's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So things like USDA red leg there, the EDA grants, HUD with CDBG, those are the ones that are maybe less known in terms of when will they actually be open again. They will be open again, I don't think they're just gonna get rid of them, but it entirely depends on when they pass a federal one.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other last comments? Randy, Sharice, Adam? Lauren? Steve? Mitch, yep.
Since the last offer was like, I think it was 25 for 28,000 an acre, I don't remember for sure. But if that's already gonna be kinda higher than what we expect the appraisal to come back, I think there's maybe some value in trying to illustrate what we expect to capture in taxes
Yes.
from it being developed. Is there anything that's available that anybody's put together? Like if you took.
I know what we have on Wilson.
Yeah, that's what I was
And
thinking.
I think if I remember right, we talked about Wilson a little bit in our meeting with the landowners, right? Of what, I don't wanna be too blunt, but $1 million building in an industrial park doesn't do anything for us. We could just go build two more homes up in Countryside at the same taxable value without extending the infrastructure. You need significant investment in capital infrastructure on a buyer's side. You know, if you look at Wilson Trailer, they're paying $300,000 a year in property taxes. You know, 10% to the county, then we probably split the rest even, 45, 55. So, you know, that's a significant investment in the community, and something you really can't shake a stick at. It's going to take, you know, hundreds of homes in some cases to provide that kind of revenue.
Sure.
So,
And the reason I bring that up is a lot of times you find yourself, you know, you're approaching a landowner that maybe isn't in a place where he wants to sell. But a lot of municipalities have to pay double the price of the land to really get it. Like when we're chasing sites for even wastewater plants or plants like that, we're usually paying double the market rate. Just because you want the land. Sure. So if there's anything you can put together to support paying more than an appraisal shows based on over time, how you expect it to repay itself, I think would be to your benefit, just for that public side,
Sounds like a spreadsheet. Tyson's on
Because if you can imagine.
I think it's a conversation for us to have with Toby
Yeah.
too.
And I think it's worth noting, those numbers are, you know, just holders, so if we get that appraisal back and it completely, you know, changes anything, you know, obviously but I think considering those things and putting all of those factors together to come up with the numbers that make sense for the final offer.
And we've talked before about making sure that, you know, that there are more than just the land as input costs to a industrial development. You've got, here's how much you can potentially sell it to an industrial buyer for. Well, you've got the land here, you add on the infrastructure, and then you add on the other infrastructure they need interior. And if you're right here, you might be okay. You're over here, forget it. You know, your other, and we've done some pro forma work with FMGA in the past that has shown kind of where that limit is, so.
I guess one last piece that I kind of forgot to mention, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse at all, but one of those end users that I've been working with would be a high power user. So I've been working with Excel on getting an SPP study put together for an offer. I'll pitch that to the end user on them covering that cost, but if it comes in a little steep, would the city be at all interested in participating in the cost of that SPP study as it would benefit the whole development? Or is that gonna be a little bit of a lip? Okay,
Yeah.
Is
just wanted to
that,
make sure I brought it up for discussion.
Nate, is that something that might already be covered in our, study with the high school that we did for the data
It's
center?
going to be, it will certainly be applicable.
Okay,
And that's kind of why I want to talk through what that might look like.
yeah,
Perfect. I should be getting the proposal from Excel, what that looks like here in the next week, so I'll share it with you. Talk about it.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? Otherwise I'll,
You got 3 minutes to vote.
okay. It's just over there if you're from here.
Pete for
So,
governor?
I'm Republican, so, all
Pete
right.
for governor?
No.
I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
All right, motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned. Thank you everybody for your time and coming
I
and
was just saying that.
coming on over and sharing. So, thank you everybody.